I've had this pain in my head as of right now, um, for like the last, at this point it's 1 o'clock in the morning. So what, 7 hours, something like that, of just like feeling empty in a way that I think it's really hard to like grasp. This sounds way more dire than it usually is. That's not what I'm trying to say. Usually when you beat a game, especially like myself, you hit like a nirvana flow state, especially if it's something that's like really resonated with you. Last year in particular, I beat, among a bunch of games, I beat in particular Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Expedition 33, both of which were firing on all cylinders and really, really made me feel just pure peak fiction. With Rebirth, it was obviously the fruits of labor that came from Remake, but just the extensive scenario building and the budget they had to create what I would call like $1 million Trails game, because it was just so indulgent that it's something that I can't help but love. And then Expedition 33, obviously, you know, it won Game of the Year that year, and then I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to stop waiting, because I was going to wait till this year to play it, but I decided, oh, you know, hell with it, I'll just play it that year, and I did, and it was amazing, especially because it was, to me at least, pulling from so many different things. Again, huge spoilers for everything stated. I'll probably put that somewhere in the video. It was pulling from near Xenoblade, specifically Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and it was just that sort of like feeling of being on a treadmill and being ripped off of it because you were specifically put on that treadmill and you believed you were there. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because Trails Beyond the Horizon has absolutely ripped me off that damn treadmill. And it's a game where the more I continued to play it, I realized that I could not look at this series the same anymore. In a good way, mind you. In a good way. It sort of started with around, like, I think after Van's Act 1, where it's at night and Yord is there. And you meet up with Yorda, and you're like, oh, you know, like, what the hell's going on? Well, I'm gonna try to not curse. I curse a lot usually. I'm gonna try to not curse. And okay, I'm trying to scroll through the pictures right now. I took over 20,000 screenshots for this game. I was not playing around. There was something. I've been doing this recently. I'll stop stuttering eventually. Where I've been taking screenshots. It'll be like individual lines, and it'll just be blow for blow. When I look back, just you can see where things start. You know, minute things that maybe don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but they matter to like the individual moments, stuff like that, is what I've been after. And so I've been taking a lot of screenshots. This is probably the biggest screenshot amount that I've had in combination with like all the other games. 20,000 for this game alone. Cold Steel 3 and 4 combined barely hits, I think, like 16,000, or maybe like, well, whatever. That's beyond the point. The point is I took a lot of freaking screenshots, and there's just a lot of moments. So I'll probably, before I start rambling at like the thought process of, you know, the endings and everything, just kind of go through with how like I felt while playing this game, because there's a lot of things that when you start looking at trailers and you start getting that like the idea, you know, and then you wonder, okay, are those like possibilities of things I'm thinking, are they going to be real? And there's one red herring, which I'll get to very, very later, that definitely caught me off guard in a way that I'm really happy about, because I've unfortunately been spoiled, not by anybody's intent, sometimes by my own, stupidness, of like the first C, I wanted to make a Code Geass joke, and I spoiled myself. The second C, I got spoiled as well. The third C, same thing. Not by my fault. It just happened to be that I was looking at a comment section, which I shouldn't have been doing. And I got spoiled again. So every single C has been spoiled for me. And I thought that it would have been the same case here for the final boss, because I had unfortunately been spoiled on its existence just because YouTube is really stupid about things. But that's where the red herring comes along, because it's not who I thought it was. It's absolutely not. But at the start, it was one of those things where I was very, I was trying to be very attentive when I was watching the trailers. And those trailers, there was only a few that I watched. Because I made sure not to watch anything after the first proper English one, where I was really analyzing in the opening those masked figures. I was specifically analyzing their weapons, and you could tell that the second one, I think it looks like a guy, whatever you would call it, has like this knife, and there's only one person, or there's technically two people that have had a knife like that, but it was definitely leaning towards the latter than the former. And then the other masked figure with a rifle, I was like, okay, that's probably going to be that person. And then the two blades, okay, that made sense. You could figure who some of these people were, if you paid attention, or were just looking too much, which you probably shouldn't do with these trailers. And so with that, I was like, okay. And then there's a cut at the end where whatchamacallit, there's that thing, right? And then you see Agnes crying, and in your head you would make that connection. And so because I had been spoiled, I was like, okay, that's where my brain was going. It had already made the assumption, but everything else in between, I had no idea. So I didn't have any reference point. I just had this idea, and of course, because it's my brain, I couldn't let go of it. There was nothing I could do. Oh jeez, that could get rid of it. So I kept it in mind as I played. But basically my mind was on full alert this entire game. And for good reason. Yume's connection event at the beginning, where she's talking about, getting a camera and taking all these pictures and making memories, raises flags in your head. A lot of flags at this point, but it's one of those things where it's, I don't even know how you would describe it, but it's just a lot. So I'll keep going past here, but it was one of those things where, it started making you worry a lot. And there's probably not going to be a lot I'm going to talk in terms of gameplay, because at this point, anything sensical or more quote-unquote factual that I wanted to say, it doesn't matter at this point. The only thing that matters is the feelings that are rushing through my body right now. And then another curious thing, I'm gonna go in order of what I was taking a screenshot of while I was playing, so this is gonna be very long and very rambly. If you want to hear it, feel free. I don't know how I'd section this off. Maybe I'll find a way to do it, but this is just gonna be nothing but rambling. So if you want anything concise, I'm sorry. That'll be the only time I apologize, by the way. I'm working on that. But then as we get to Agnes's house in this brand new district, which is really cool, I was shocked at how this actually doesn't come up here, but it comes up later when you have Rocksmith at the what the hell is it called? At the cafe where Yume lives. Where they talk about how Gramhart is you know, he was there in Liberl and he was helping everybody out. And it made me think back to Trails in the Sky for the remake, where in the picture where who was it? I think it was General Morgan was shaking hands with Van Dyck. And in the back on the Liberl side, you could see, you know, Cassius, obviously, but then you also saw someone that looked like Gramhart, and I was like, holy shit, no way. And obviously on the other side you saw Osborne, and Osborne's amazing, and that set me off. But then when I looked, you know, over on the Liberl side, I really saw like Gramhart, and I was like, no freaking way. And they did that, and then I'm like, oh, I guess it's interesting because, you know, despite the fact that Sky First was made more recently than Horizon was, they released it in an opposite order, but it ends up working in their favor because of that fact. It's very interesting. It's very, very enjoyable. And then where were we going here? Because it was a lot of stuff. But okay, yeah. From here on, I think this is very like pretty standard. I wasn't on edge a lot. I was very much enjoying the relationship between Elaine and Van, as I usually do. The Grim Garden section I think was pretty box standard, but it's really after that when like it opens up and you're like, oh wait a minute, this is really cool, because they went more in terms of like how Reverie did it, where it was unique bosses, it was unique things that mattered rather than just kind of generic monsters like they did in Daybreak 2, which is fair. I like that. I very much enjoyed that. But it was with the section where I think I said this earlier and I just didn't continue on it, where Yorda shows up at night and Van and her go on an excursion and they meet with Ren and Risha, where that's where I think like the first time my like heart sunk into like my stomach. It genuinely, like, it had been a while, I think a year at this point, where I was you know, waiting for like the next chapter in Trails, and this was it. And when I got to that moment and you see what is that guy's name? I think his name is Jeffrey, like Valentine, yeah, where you see him and you see his transformation into like that thing, that monster of sorts, and it just felt so different compared to anything that had like come prior. The way it felt just like really cemented in my head that this is really into the future and we're really moving. There was also a section earlier, it was really funny, where you go into like this underground club and you see the idols, and you turn the camera and you just see Yun Kafai just sitting there, and you're like, no freaking way, what the hell is he doing here? You go talk to him and he pulls some typical Master Roshi. It just starts dancing and acting a fool. And as the player, you're obviously like, what is he doing here? And everyone else is just like, okay, it's an old man doing whatever. That was really funny. But back to the section at the night, the Yorda section was just like, it really, really set in that this march into the future was not stopping at any point. And I think I've been kind of coasting on that feeling for a long, long time. It definitely, like, just, it was scary. I've said it too much now, I'm gonna move on. It was a strong moment. It was a very strong moment. And the way Renee acted, it was setting off some bells, but in a different way, because it just didn't make sense that the CID or Calvert in general just didn't really care that there was like the birth of a new cult. But it was made pretty clear that, like, oh, I guess they really wanted to focus on the on the space project, which I guess I could like say whatever, but I mean, when you're in a world with like the prior cult required the entirety of the continent to come together, it set off some bells. And then Reen Route 1, that's a tongue twister. When it was going, that was pretty solid. It was, again, very, very flavorful, more akin to, typical world building. Excuse me. But it made you wonder, because this is a game, I think, unlike any other Trails game, where the world building is, like, very, very much on the side now, because this is very forward-moving plot progressing. Like, there's a rush to get to the point, which makes sense given the game and the timeline the game has to operate on. It's a very short amount of time, even shorter than, say, like, Reverie, because Reverie was, like, in a week in game, and this is, like, 3-4 days, which is insane. And so watching Reen, Crow, and everybody, like, do their thing, like, Reen Route 1 was very chill, but again, it's set up a lot where it's like, okay, we're really, like, just, like, we're gonna chill after that prior van section. And then we head back to Van here, and there's a lot of, like, eking towards Rosette, like, really trying to figure her out, because we have had nothing for a while, and it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, yeah, we really didn't think about this at the time. Yeah. So what happens when you scroll through, like, a bazillion pictures, trying to get to the next section. Then the point about the Devancy brothers was also interesting, because they were flip-flop. Another word, flip-flop. They were, like, showing up every so often. It was one and then the other. So it was really cool seeing a minor character like that get used again. And then there's a section where, or again, going chronologically, at least forward, where Van and the others are in the opera. The opera, I guess? Where they have to, like, play along at the, dude, the words are just going out of my head. Auction, there we go. That was insanely funny. The comedy in this game, with Ulrika alone, is insanely hilarious. Hearing her influencer talk just made me, like put my hands up in front of my head and also laugh. It was just so funny. But then when you get to Kevin's section, Kevin Act 1, you could see, obviously, if you're familiar with Kevin, that he's really pushing back into being a heretic hunter. And the way he respects Swin and Nadia's, like, oath is very touching. But the ability to use, say, like, Rufus and Lapis was very, very on point. And it just, like, you could see that it wasn't really working. Because Kevin's trying to put that heretic hunter back on, but it's hard for him to do so, right? It's like it's hard for Reen to go back to being depressed to the same level. He's still got a little bit of it in him, but it's mostly like they're putting on strong faces and saying things, but they're not really all about it the same way you would think they are. And this kind of reminds me a lot of Reverie, in which Kevin's route obviously is very much like C's route because it has Rufus in it. And it's the route that has a lot of the behind the scenes going on, which is great. Same with Reen as well, but it was a little bit less in terms of because of how like Kevin works it. But then you get the reveal of Hamilton and Dingo working together, which you got at the end of Daybreak 2, and it made me think, because she was talking about how this place was ruined, and now I was really wondering if like the other disciples were also in on it, which Hamilton confirms that they weren't much later on. But it made me wonder if the things we were even looking at were real. And that sort of thing was just very scary. And then of course, Kevin with his dual stigmas was insanely hype. I was shocked. I was shocked and also scared because he was probably gonna kick my butt. I'm gonna be real. Thankfully, it wasn't too difficult because it was, you know, like, what, 3 against 1? That was doable. But it was definitely a showcase of, like, things aren't a joke. You know, he can't hold back anymore. Oh, excuse me. And then we cut to the garden section. We have Simeon, and Simeon is very interesting. He's it's always cool because there's a lot of enforcers that you have to, like, work with, and they have to power skill them somehow. And so seeing an Imaginator is like is you know, the potential for that is so cool, and it definitely lived up, I think, to what was possible. The things he was able to do was really, really interesting. And the memento orbs, those, I was thinking, like Reverie, were going to be a lot longer. They were not, which is okay. I think it was all right, because they felt like they set up the intrigue perfectly, and then you had to sit on it for a while, and then when the reveal came in the main story, you were like, oh, that's why I saw that. It lined up perfectly. Everything was very much within this game, and I don't know if there was anything that I think wasn't brought up in this game. Definitely very on point. And again, it continues to play into the fact that this was very focused on making that sort of progress that a lot of the other games wouldn't, because they were focused on a different aspect, which is great for them. And that's one of the reasons why I still like Reverie as much as I like Beyond the Horizon, because it's very, very much doing two different things. Horizon represents a very different era compared to, say, Reverie. And I've said this to a friend before, but I genuinely keep mixing those two names up. I don't know why. It just keeps happening. But they hold a lot of influence in my head. And then when you go back to Reen's, I think Act 2 at this point, it really showcases why people like Cassius, Estelle, and Joshua were not allowed into Erebonia. Because when you let Thor's Class 7 into Calvard, and you didn't really, like, you know, have the security on them, they uncovered a lot. And since the prologue, when you saw, like, the cutscene of, like, space from the AR view that Thorndike put up, Crow and Reen had that memory of the thing they saw when they were out there. But what I had thought was that that was, like, a different possibility that didn't happen. And for that, like, in the prologue, that was, like, completely set me off, and I was very, very worried. I was like, what the fuck? You know, what happened there? And then when you get to the telescope, I was sitting there, and I was like, okay, everyone sees something normally. And then you get to Reen looking at it, and you're like, he can't look at it normally. He sees something beyond, or what it is, truthfully, and I'm like, holy hell. And then Crow does the same thing, and he's like, yep, same thing for him. And in my head, I would think that, like, more than likely, if Milligan was there, she would have saw the same thing as them. It's very, very just shell-shocking, I think. And then also completely unrelated, but, you know, very, very fluff-related, is Mint's relationship with Elliot. I was like, you know, with a lot of the male characters in Class 7 and New Class 7, they have a lot of romantic, not a lot, they have one romantic interest, whereas the girls don't, because it's usually probably with Reen. But I like that for both old and New Class 7, where there's, like, a girl that's interested in them, and they'll, like, basically, I think, be in a relationship. Like, Gaius and Linda are in one, Elliot and Mint are now in one, Ash and Tatiana are probably eventually. I just think that's a really nice touch. But the revelation at the end of Reen Act 2 was pretty much all that we confirmed. I say we, like there's an entity, it's me. But that confirmation of the sort of truth that was out there was very much just, like, again, my heart is continuing to sink further and further into my chest. And the boss fight was pretty cool. Thankfully, it wasn't that hard because the combo meter was firing on all cylinders. If you get Rabbit Sword or Clean Force, and you're just doing multi-hits, you are gonna stack damage like no other. It was amazing. And then back to Van again, of course. It's pretty bog standard for a while here. I think this Edith section was pretty casual, because it's not until... Oh, and there's the introduction of Fabio. Fabio was interesting. But it's not until I think the underground happens. I absolutely know. I'm just specifically going plot for plot here, because I guess that's a way to help me kind of get this off my chest. Because it is genuinely incomprehensible how you can like even continue to like think properly. But it's at this point when they show up at the park and the vestiges show up again, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my god, we finally have like a third party. And they look a lot like the Garden Master. Not specifically like him, but like the capes and everything. It just makes it seem like there's somebody beyond the society and the CID or whoever it may be, and they're doing something. Poor Rosette also gets PTSD. At this moment we don't know, but it's a lot of stuff that's happening. The vestiges are from my early memory of like really hyper scrutinizing that. I say really scrutinizing it, but just like really paying attention to it. I was like, okay, I know who a few of these are, and I was thinking I was right, and I was wrong on maybe one of them. But then there was a bunch more, and I was like, oh my god, there's just way more than I thought there was. And then you have the amazing section where Van and Agnes are on this like late night date, and it's touching because earlier in the day, you could tell that Albert was gonna confess. You already knew that he was interested in her from the past 2 games, but he had a conviction on his face, and he was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And you could tell that Agnes rejected him, especially because, you know, when he went over, like, his boys were comforting him, you could tell that it just didn't go out right. And in my head, I was thinking, I'm like, okay, now is where Agnes is probably going to confess to Van. And that confession, I think, is really beautiful, because even though I'm a very big fan of, like, Van and Elaine, because, like, most people, they wrote it really well, it makes the most sense. I don't think it's wrong for Agnes specifically to have a crush on Van. And I wouldn't really like if Van took advantage of that, but he's not a character that would do that. He's never, like, I don't think Falcom's ever written a character that would take advantage of another person like that. So it's one of those things where it's done very tastefully, in the sense that he lets her down. He's like, it's nice that you love me like that, and I'm glad you care, but I can't do that. I can't see you as a romantic partner. And she knew in the back of her head, and I think it was very clear in that night that it just wasn't going to be that. And the most comedic section that kind of set off like bells in my head in a more comedic way was when Agnes like snaps, and she's like, you know, she's a damn it, Van, you should have just, you know, went out with everybody and 2-timed everybody. And it was just like, it was very clear she was like putting on a front face there. It was very, very sweet. But it was a good decision by Falcom to do what they did there. I think that was perfect. It was very touching. Oh god, I'm like all stuffed. But then we're going to Anchorville, and Anchorville is really where things like, well, this is like the tail end of the game now at this point. But seeing Rosette, I think her name is Shannon, in the cafe again. You know, you've been kind of like edged on like Rosette lore this entire time, and you're getting closer. You're getting really closer. And they absolutely deliver to certain levels, because Anchorville is beautiful, And there's two things here that I think really get like some good attention, and it's not the excuse me, it's not the vestiges. It's the Rosette section, and it's Eaton News that stood out to me very much here. Oh, there's also the Agnes connection event in Anchorville, which really like resonates with my heart. I'll specifically talk about the connection event first, because maybe it's just how I am as a person, but when it comes to like the feelings of children and like taking care of them, seeing especially children who are orphaned and like fighting for a family, and like the idea of like, you know, your family just leaving you, it resonates a lot, just because it's such a deep emotional thing for anyone to like see and feel. Like when I was watching the Anne Shirley anime, I cried a lot, because especially with the time era that it's in, but specifically like how, you know, orphans are treated, how, you know, children want that connection. I'm gonna cry now just talking about it. But Anne's, you know, relation with Matthew and Marilla is so very sweet, and seeing in Agnes' connection event where Van like talks to Jed, and he's like, apparently when his parents dropped him off, or whoever dropped him off at the orphanage, they said they couldn't raise this child. That really freaking hurt. Well, I'm gonna cry. Oh god. Oh. But yeah, that section was insanely just really touching. And then of course you have the reveal of the vestiges here, which was amazing. And then you head back over to Kevin. So we're at Kevin, I think Act 2 right now. Oh god, I'm crying up a storm. But then Kevin's route is where they find the machine that's like creating the sandstorms in the freaking desert. And I like that section to begin with, because it's just a huge area. You get to have fun gameplay wise, but to have this like genuine Yeast level of like environment where that like tower is just like, it's so beautiful. The art direction in this game rivals, I think, the Crossbell era in like the PSP art style. That's just so beautiful. It was like especially because the PC port is so amazing, the lighting and the textures and the fog and everything just really made it stand out. And then you get the revelation of what friggin' Hamilton did, and to this day, like looking at it now, especially after the whatchamacallit, the finale, I still don't even have an idea how she would have done it. How she stole water. Because it was 1189 when this project happened. So she would have stolen water 10 years from then. So I guess that works out. To an extent. Because she did steal it from beyond 1210, 1209. And I realize there, again, this is spoilers anyways. I'm going to put that thing at the beginning where it's like, hey, this spoilers for everything. But it's the time specifics are just like, you're really wondering how fluid and backwards it all is. The revelation is amazing. And then, what do we have here? Yeah, we have more Rosette stuff that happens. There's a fight with Walter, which is really funny. The mementos are all really amazing, and I probably wouldn't make a video like specifically on those, because I'm rambling enough as it is. So I'll ramble about it here. But Novartis has always been interesting, because he has very much been a character ever since Azure in his showcase, where you've really looked at him and you've just wondered, what the hell is this guy gonna do? because you just don't know anything about him. And then come Reverie, and you see him obviously doing more crazy stuff, but then he gets scared of McBurn. And I know one of the more popular things is that McBurn is either Claude Epstein or Naita, either of which we have nothing to go off of, so there's just no possibility. But the way he talked in the this like conference that all the disciples were having was interesting. And then because he specifically talks like he should be a part of them in a way, but isn't. And that really reminds me, because it really resonated later, where I was thinking about how Reen was like the secret disciple in the Eight Leaves with Yun Kafai and Shizuna. So I was wondering if Novartis was kind of the same in that aspect, where he was like a secret extra. And that definitely had its own revelation, which was very interesting at the end of the Garten sections. Because there's a lot of stuff they deliver on, and there's stuff that they don't deliver on, because this game is doing a lot of things in a lot of different places. And when I say they don't deliver on things, I mean they just specifically, like, it's just open right now. They just haven't gotten to that yet. Because it's very much like Cold Steel 3, where the tension is building and building and building and building, and there's a bubble point, and that bubble point is all the way through the roof, through the stratosphere, through all of what creation itself is, honestly, at this point. And then Reen's final act in Long Lie was really amazing, I think. The moment with Walter and Jin and Kilika all being there back at their dojo and paying respects to their master's grave was very touching. Again, it's a very nice way of showing that Trails is not just pro-tag focused, but it's multi-prong focused, right? And, at this point in the series, I think everybody knows that. It was very touching. But getting ready to go up there and fight Yun Kafai was really enticing. It was so freaking just unbelievable. Kurogane was, sick as well. And then the freaking reveal that, like, Arioke and Olympia were there. I was like, no freaking way. Because I had been pondering for like crazy for days upon days, wondering if Almada's like goons had survived or not. But the ones that, weren't actually killed off. Because Daybreak 1 section where whatchamacallit is like, where you clearly had a choice to kill them or not kill them, but the spare option had so much more work put into it, so much more cutscene value. It was interesting to see them, I guess, take a weird middle ground here. Because I guess this is taking from my Daybreak New Game Plus save. I don't know if I killed them in that one, but I guess the implication is that they have synthetic bodies. Again, I'm jumping ahead here, but this game has been cutting back and forth in both Reen and Kevin's like final route, where they both line up to the time wrapper for the launch, and then you go back to Van and you have to work back up to it. It's very, very, very much an edge session. But then I guess like currently back to the garden here. I think it's like Van Route 5 or something, where Simeon is a fight, and his fight is really interesting because at the end of the fight, they mention that he used swords similar to Luve, but I guess I did my fight so freaking well that he didn't end up using that craft, and I was like, what the hell? So I did the fight again, and I saw it that time, and I was like, dude, that's freaking cool as hell. And then the next memento here is two things. There's Kevin and Thomas, and this like statue they found in Cray, which was a shock when you find out what it actually is. But then Nina and Rufino specifically. We still don't have a lot of answers, obviously, but the way Nina talks is very much like she's not from here. Like, she has to speak Zemurian, whatever that is, right? And that set me off. And then you have Rosette's Memento, where it's this life and this place, and we just don't know where it is or where it could have been. But the fact that Rosette had one. But then, of course, the thing that next, the thing I was talking about earlier with Anchorville is the Eaton News Agency with Sunshine on Yes. And this is a thing where originally, I think when I saw it in Crossbill, I think that's where it popped up, right? I didn't really pay it in mind. There's a lot of books I didn't pay much attention to. Where, oh shit, that just clicked in my head. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Where, whatchamacallit, the book series Sunshine on Yes, you know, it's clearly has on Yes in the name, and I'm like, oh, is there gonna be a relation? And when you're kind of reading it, you're like, huh, that's interesting. And then in the in Beyond the Horizon, they're talking about how like it somehow knows things, but some things are a little bit different, which perfectly lines up with a later revelation, which I'll hopefully bring up. But specifically the revelation that there's a medallion that says "for the other Agnes." Now, with the revelations of the ending, I think I have something I can go on, but at this point, it's just realizing, you know, what the hell do you mean the other Agnes? Because I'm very much on edge. Ever since Xenoblade Chronicles 3, when a character says my or our, because they're specifically talking about them, right? When N or Noah says my Mio, my Noah, they don't just mean it like specifically like mine. They mean it as like mine, like my version. And so when you say something like that, especially after Expedition 33 as well, they're talking about a certain version of a character. And that is, it's insane. It has me thinking of, you know, so many storms of what that could mean. Then where are we going from here? We have Harwood and this Pandemonium 2 that shows up with vestiges, and the revelation of how bizarre it is. I guess like the fact that the vestiges can exist in this time, showing that something is wrong, and that Melchior is like RGB hair, which is really, really cool. But it's such an anomaly of things that just like hurts my head. My head is still hurting right now. I thought it would go away when I ate food, when I ate some like dinner. It is not. I'm like recoiling from this. And then Kevin's final section, Act 3. Definitely one of the hardest bosses, next to the Nine-Tailed Fox in the garden, because the damage output here was just abysmal in comparison. I really had to make sure I countered Bewitch because it hurt a lot. But being in Cray was so very endearing. The way the theme of Cray like took over, and like you didn't hear a battle theme, you specifically heard that theme instead. Was very, very touching. And then traveling around as Lapis. God, it hurt my freaking soul, because Cray was just a nice place. And you think back, and when they were showcasing Daybreak 2 footage, like way back when, they specifically had footage, and I know they do this because it's just early game footage, so it doesn't really mean much. But they had footage of Elaine and Agnes and Van specifically. And after learning what happened in Daybreak 1, and then the things that happened in Daybreak 2 with time travel, I was like thinking, oh, are they possibly going to go back in time and save Cray? It didn't happen, but now I'm thinking about it in the context of the end of this game here. Where when you go and you like find out all the people that Dominique and Hamilton knew, was just like, God, this has been a thing in the making for God knows how long. And then of course you get Edge, and then on top of it, Oh, actually, now that makes sense. Because when you see these new vestiges and they have, like, all these new weapons, and you just, like, this group of people in particular, you have no freaking idea who the hell they are. But now that I'm thinking about it, and I just mentioned Shinna Dirk, I'm thinking maybe it's some people like that. Maybe. I don't know. And then after that, it's the finale. It's the finale of finales. To ever finale, man. It is... it makes Sky FC, Cold Steel 1, and Cold Steel 3 all look like footnotes in comparison. And those were damning. Those were damning beyond belief. But this finale section, where I truly had no idea, based on how time was working, how we would get to where we were going to get to. But the reveal of Rosette and this like life support chamber where it frickin' says 1259 or something. What was it like? Let me look here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it was 1259 Anchorville. Insane. I was like, what? Wait. How is that possible? And then you get into the Garten, and it's like this Nayuta looking, like, final. Like, if you've ever been to, like, the finale of Nayuta, you see it and you recognize it and you're like, what the hell? I don't know if this is related to Nayuta, but Mare talks about how, like, the answer is in there or something. And it's just, this section is crazy. And then, of course, there's the final memento with Graham Hart and his wife, I think it's Sophie. And then Agnes, she's crying, and then they're all crying because they want, you know, their beloved to stay with her. Stay with them. And it's such an amazing contrast to say something like specifically Reen and Osborne, where so much of everything was left unsaid between them. But Graham Hart, Agnes, and Sophie, they got to speak. They got to be a family for a while. And like this really elevates Graham Hart, because I was wondering, I'm like, okay, this man is on par with Osborne, doing crazy stuff like talking to the Grandmaster. And you finally see he is fighting tooth and nail, much like Osborne was, hiding those emotions. But unfortunately, unlike Osborne, who had that iron will, he really does let it out. He is very much just holding it in as best he can. And then Agnes as well, with her father and her mother. It's so sweet. I almost cried there. I should have cried. It's hard for me to cry sometimes, and sometimes it's easy for me to cry. And then she's in a section, her bonding event, connection event, where she gets like overtaken by her sword is so beautiful. It's amazing. And then you actually get to fight that section. I was like, oh my god, I like it, because usually when it's like a fight in like the connection events, it's pretty one note off screen. But this time you actually had to fight, and I was like, God, it's beautiful. It was amazing. And then there's a Ren connection event way back in Edith. I did a lot of these at the end, because I was like, I want to clear all this out before I finish this game, because the game lets you do that. And the Blue Blanc shows up. my goat Blue Blanc shows up. I freaking love him. And he like gives thanks to Kitty, to Ren and Van, and it's sweet. It was very nice. And then another section that really got to me was one of Bermonti's connection events. He was playing with tarot cards, and he specifically he mentions, I guess, learnings about it or something, and it reminds me, because there's only a few other people who've played tarot cards at this point in the series, and there's Sherazade and Luciola. And there's not much known about Bermonti, but I doubt he'd be a person who was part of like a traveling troupe. So it's up in the air currently, but it's very interesting. Excuse me. And then in Tharbad, Lapis and Swin's sections with Kevin are very touching, because a lot of it is like saying, hey, yeah, you're a good guy, and Kevin's like really trying to say, no, I'm not, but they all call him out on it, and Kevin kind of meets them halfway. But here we are at the end, where we're at the finale here. I've yapped for I don't know how long. And you have you have Novartis at the end, and you're like, okay, this guy has been cooking since Azure. What the hell is he about? What has he been doing? And he tests like this ion epsilon. Shoutouts to Sonic Adventure. And it's really cool, but then he gets the data. Oh, and he's also gassing at McBurn. Everyone gasses at McBurn in this game, and I love it. But he gets this revelation where he's like really happy that like 1% of data is analyzed from this sanctum, which is insane. Like, it's not even 1%. It's literally 0.000000001% of like data salvaged from the sanctum. And he gets it 1154, cycle 19,998. I hear that. I put my controller down. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Cycle 19,998. And that reminds me of when you have the, the Zemuria Grand Odyssey album. It's titled 19,999. It did not click in my head what that meant. I thought it was just like a unique thing that they decided to toss out. They specifically meant that, and a friend of mine was telling me, oh, it goes backwards. It's like, it starts Daybreak, and then it goes Erebonia, Crossbow, Liberal. Insanity. That they would even go that far with supplemental media like that. And then, of course, with Novartis, it says that he was only Epstein's... saying Epstein is so bad, I'm sorry. His disciple, which is terrible, God. But only one, and that doesn't mention the other three. And so you're like, what does that mean? But then you're thinking cycles. And so that doesn't make sense. And Bren even makes a mention, is that you're an official student. And I was thinking back to the Reen thing with you and Kafai. I don't have an answer for that yet. But then, you know, the Grandmaster shows up. This is the first time to meet anybody. It's a very, very cool scene. But then you finally get to meet up with, you know, Qasim and the president, and Viola and Alexandra and Renee. And you're fighting them, and you're like, okay, this is a pretty solid fight. And you see, oh my god, you see friggin' Hermes, and she's out there in space. And Giscard and Esmeralda are like, their faces are pitch black. Jack, drink water. Their faces are freaking pitch black. Scared to hell is what the way they can actually see. Reen and Crow are like, what the hell? They're feeling it. And then you see the Excalibur section, and you're like, this is gonna be a freaking amazing cutscene. And it's like, the production value is so beautiful. And they're firing nukes. They're firing nukes at this goddamn cube thing. I was talking to a friend, so I was streaming it to him. I'm like, dude, there's this cube on the front of the goddamn box. I haven't seen it yet. We get into space. We find it. It's this goddamn thing in space. And they're firing nukes at it. And then you even get to play this section as Amelia. I was at the bottom of my seat, but obviously I knew. It was like, okay, it showed the destruction of it, and I'm like, no, something's up. This is the Septarian of time. You're not winning that easily. It is in space. It's called time. And then you see that shadow. You see goddamn Zoa Gilstein. I was hooting and hollering. I was like, no freaking way. How is that damn thing here? and he shoots Amelia down, and they're like flying towards Cray, and I'm like, dude, a second bomb is gonna hit Cray. And it doesn't, which is great, because Kevin and them are there. But then it turns into the freaking statue. What? And then Renee starts acting really freaking creepy. And it turns out he's the Golden Grendel. It's him. The whole time. The opening for Trails Beyond the Horizon is this red herring beyond red herrings, where it makes you think it's Agnes, but it's freaking Renee. I was screaming. It was like, no freaking way. Also, he kicked my butt in the first round. That was insanely rough, but I stabilized. But then he takes you to space on a meteor, and you're fighting in action combat. And then he takes you back, and it's phase 2, and he just takes on everybody. And he leaves, and then you have Agnes, and she meets with all these other people at the top, and Gramhart is like, please don't. Everyone in Arkwright Solutions, everyone that she's met is like, please don't. But she's made up her goddamn mind. She's made up her goddamn mind, and she resets and she rewrites the Septarian to an earlier save point, and we have no goddamn idea where that save point is gonna be. She wipes herself out of existence, it seems. And it's supposed to be Van's final episode. I don't know what the hell that means. I truly don't. Nina was the fake Saint of the end, because she was like, that was just the role she was playing. She didn't seem to actually be it. It seems Agnes was the Saint of the end. That's where I'm going with that. Another thing I was talking about when it comes to resets is the fact that, unlike the other resets like in Zero, where it seems localized, right? It seems localized to that. Well, maybe it wasn't even localized because it turned back time for everybody. But with this, I was thinking about, what was that? 32 cypress trees? 33 cypress trees? And how that farmer was planting those trees. And obviously, 20,000 is more than 19, or 32 trees. But was that an indication of, the fact that there were cycles? I don't know. I've been yapping for God knows how long now. With Cold Steel 3, I felt broken. I was like, dude, we gotta save my guys. But this, there just aren't words. We're at the point where words can no longer convey, the feelings you're feeling. And you're burdened with the knowledge of just the things that change every single goddamn thing. There's nothing left in my head. And it even hurts more because there's a lot of people, getting into the series, and they're feeling really hyped. I can't even look at them the same anymore. It physically hurts to sit there and look at people playing Sky, Crossbill, Cold Steel, knowing this is what's at the end. Let me tell you, man, I cannot wait to find the next section. I cannot wait. So, if anyone made it through the whole thing, this is like, Jesus Christ, it's 2 hours. I'm looking at the thing right now. Thank you so much for listening to me yap in a very unedited way. I'll probably get better at. No, I won't. But yeah, man, there's nothing left for me to say. Thank you.